Hi everyone, I'm Jordan,
And I'm Kelty.
and we want to welcome you to the YWAMERS podcast.
We're excited to have you here.
On this podcast, we interview youth with a mission who are everywhere reforming the spheres, aka YWAMERS, in the hope that our listeners will be inspired on how they too can be missionaries in their everyday life. Well, welcome everyone to the podcast today. Jordan and Kelty here. Hello from Kelty. Now today, our third interview, we have someone on that was one of my best friends during my DTS a good 7 years ago, and we haven't really talked much, so I'm about to learn as much as you guys listening. So welcome, Nate Kirsch.
Thanks for having me, Jordan.
So Nate, first question.
And Kelty.
Quite important for us here. What is your Myers-Briggs personality type?
I am an ENTJ.
ENTJ, I thought
See,
so.
I thought you guys must be close.
I'm an
You're similar.
ESTJ.
Yeah.
And Kelty is
Okay.
an INFP for everyone listening. And do you know your Enneagram? Because Enneagram seems to be the rave these days, but I don't know if you're up with the hip Christian rave personality tests.
Yeah, I'm always going to be up with the hip Christian stuff. I am a 1 with a 9 wing.
Okay. I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
An ENTJ1. That's
Yeah. Well, he's someone that's very loyal and works very hard.
Well, that makes sense. A lot of INTJs are at 1.
That's true. Well, I don't think we've talked on the podcast what we are. For those listening, I'm a 3, and Kelty, you are
6.
yeah, and I don't know what wings we are.
No.
We're still figuring that out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, the purpose of the podcast, YWAMERS. So, Nate, tell us where and when did you do your DTS?
Well, I did my DTS with Jordan in 2012, January term. We did the lecture phase in Kona, and I did my outreach in Cambodia. And the DTS I did was fire and fragrance.
Right on. And back when we did DTS together, we shared rooms across multiple DTSs. I think a year after you left,
Yeah.
it was only like I only roomed with people from my DTS. So that was pretty cool when we got to room together with, the enemy, different DTS.
Right. It was some cross pollination going on.
And did you stay on after DTS, or did you go straight back home?
Yeah, it's an interesting part of my story. So when I felt like the Lord was calling me to YWAM, I was pretty confident that he was calling me to come on full time. I had met a guy named Dax Fears in 2010. We were on a missions trip to South Africa together for the summer, and he ended up right after South Africa going on full time with YWAM doing Justice Water. And felt like the Lord was calling me to do my DTS so that I could go on full time with him. So that was kind of always the intention. And then when I got there and kind of went through the process, I realized that as much as I really believe that everyone in the world deserves clean water, and that's a kingdom initiative and absolutely like an awesome response to the gospel I'm just not good with my hands, and I'm not good at any of the things that would have made me a good part of that team, other than the fact that I felt strongly that people deserve clean water. So I think the Lord made it pretty clear to me towards the end of DTS that he brought me there for that 6-month period to kind of pursue my heart, and wanted to send me back home to kind of pursue vocation and try to figure out what that would look like.
Wow, right on. So you thought you were going to DTS for one reason, you thought that's where God was leading you, but in the end it seemed like he was leading you there for another reason, and through the process it sounds like you learned more even about how you were designed, how you operate, and what God was calling you to.
Yeah, totally. It's funny because I don't think if the Lord had like made it clear to me that I was supposed to go for 6 months to like learn or to grow as like in my relationship with him, I don't think I would have gone. I would have been like, oh Lord, there's other ways I can do that. I don't need to like travel the world and like raise a bunch of support and do all this. I can just So I think like, my heart was kind of thing so that he could pull me into this space where he could really pursue me and prepare me for all the things that were going to come after DTS. So it was kind of sweet the way like he just knew me, and knew like how I was, what it was going to take to get me there.
Yeah, it's super cool. You're kind of breaking up a little bit, Nate. I don't know if you can get in a spot where there's better internet or if it's our connection.
Let me try something
Sure.
here. Is this any better?
That does sound better. That sounds much better, yeah. So tell us, what are you doing now? What spheres are you involved in?
Wait, before that, how old were you when you did your DTS?
Hey, you guys just popped back in. Is it
How
clear?
old were you? Yeah, it's way better.
Way better, yeah.
Okay, yeah, my Wi-Fi is terrible. I just got off the Wi-Fi. I'm just gonna use data.
Okay, sweet.
That's very nice of you. How old were you when you did your DTS?
I'm a math teacher. Let me think about that. I think I was 22.
Okay.
22 is the same age as me when I did mine.
So-
Are you 89?
Yeah.
89, yeah, you're 22.
So you hadn't gone to university or anything yet before DTS, or did you?
Yeah, I graduated in 2011, and then so then I did DTS January 2012. So I was like 6 months out of college,
Okay.
So
which was kind of unique, I think.
Yeah, that's rare. But same as you.
Yeah, sure. And then you did your DTS when you were 25?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were old
So
as.
old.
You were old with a mission, but I still love you. So, Nate, what are you doing now? Like, where is God taking you? What are you involved with? Where are you located?
Yeah, so I took kind of a detour for about a year, but now I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and I did a program called the Memphis Teacher Residency, which is a Christian organization that equips people to go into public high schools in inner city classrooms in Memphis and teach. So I started that program in I guess the summer of 2013, and I've been here ever since.
And the process, so you did your DTS January 2012, so that means you graduated like June, July. And so what was that period of transition like between leaving and then finding your way to Memphis, Tennessee? Was that a smooth transition? Did you know what God was saying, what you wanted to do, or was it kind of rocky?
Yeah. So I knew, so kind of going back to I thought I was going to be there for a while thing. So I knew there's these kind of themes in my heart, and kind of like who I am. So I knew there was this theme of I want to serve, I care about people. And so I thought that was missions, but that's what that meant, overseas, global missions.
Yeah.
But I also, in undergrad, I majored in math and minored in physics, and played 2 sports. And those things were really fun for me, and I really enjoy being a part of those things. And so I was like, God kind of has put this thing in my heart to kind of serve and to equip, and but also there's these other things like who I am. I'm a person who enjoys math, which there's not a lot of us out there, and I'm a person who likes sports and I thought maybe I would like coaching and teaching, and so I got an opportunity to do a little bit of teaching on my DTS, and I liked it. So that was kind of that's where I ended up. But at first I just knew all right, I'm good at math. Maybe I should just get a job. I need to just get a job and be responsible. So I kind of pursued this career called an actuary, which it's a little bit hard to explain what exactly it is. But basically,
Calculates interest rates or something?
Yeah, I was working for a consulting firm in the business world. I was doing data analysis, sitting in a cubicle on Microsoft Excel 8 hours a day.
Hardcore.
And it's funny. It's actually rated as one of the top job satisfaction jobs because it's pretty low stress, but decent pay as you kind of move up in the world, and no crazy busy season like accountants have, or it's not crazy hours like doctors and lawyers. And so But I quickly realized that it wasn't something I wanted to do long term. So I started asking questions of friends, and I had a friend who was a teacher, and ended up getting connected with him, and he told me about this program, and that's why I applied.
Okay. Cool. So through a relationship, so pretty much you looked at your giftings, looked at your skill set, looked at your background, thought this seems like a good fit, went into that, but then through that process realized that maybe it wasn't, but it was through someone else kind of asking you through a relationship you had, which this opportunity popped up.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like YWAM was like, all right, there's this part of me that wants to serve, and then working in that consulting world was like, all right, there's a part of me that wants to be intellectually challenged. And then being an inner city high school math teacher, when I like found out about this opportunity, I was like, oh, this is the thing. This is like what God's been calling me to. I've just had to find it. And it was through a relationship from a friend from college that like he made me aware of it. And like literally, I mean, it was amazing. It was like I've been praying and like seeking, like, God, this thing that I'm doing doesn't quite feel right. There's some parts that I like, but some other parts that just don't feel like this is what you have for me. And then when I talked to my friend on the phone, he said, oh, you're thinking about teaching. Oh, if you're thinking about teaching, Nate, you would love this program that I'm doing. And for the next 45 minutes, he just poured his heart out, like on what he's doing, what the program's all about. And I was like, I was all ears. I mean, it was amazing. And when I literally hung up the phone, I was at my parents' house at the time. I hung up the phone. I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I think I'm moving to Memphis. Like, it was like instant. Like I just knew, like, this is what I've been asking for. It was like this. It was probably the most certain I've ever been about like the Lord just like telling me this is the next thing. It was just so much confidence in my heart.
I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah, it was a pretty awesome moment of like the culmination of like, felt like probably, I guess, 2 years of seeking the Lord's will, like what was next. And obviously all those steps kind of prepare me for what I'm doing now, because without what I learned in DTS and what I learned about other things, like I wouldn't have been able to have the positive experience I've had. But this is the second I got here, I was like, oh yes, this is where I'm supposed to be.
That's so cool. That's awesome.
So is your view of ministry, like, has that changed through this whole process, or have you always kind of seen ministry as kind of whatever you're doing as a Christian? Or tell us a bit about what it is to be in this school intercity setting, and what's it like to live out your faith in that setting, and how that ties into what is ministry to you?
I think for a long time, a lot of us, right, we have this like idea that, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people in Christian circles that I've run in have this like sacred and secular divide. So there's like those who are serving the Lord with their work, and then those who are working. And I just think as I've grown and like and matured and had a lot of conversations, I've kind of shifted my view on some of that stuff. And I think ministry is more of like a mindset. And it's about like taking your work and laying it at the feet of Jesus as an offering. And so what that means is that I'm a high school math teacher, and there are plenty of high school math teachers who are teaching math, and that is their job, but it's not a ministry. But I'm doing the exact same thing as them, but because my intentions are different, the way I see my students and the purpose for why I'm there might be different. It kind of becomes ministry. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So I think that when you're doing what you're doing as a response to the gospel, it'll be done in a way that reflects that you believe that the people you're serving have dignity and worth, and the job you're doing is worth doing well. And that can flesh itself out as something that could be called ministry. Yeah.
Well explained. You should be like a teacher or something.
I was like, that was really well explained.
No, that's really good. Sounds like you went through a process. And yeah, for me, growing up in a kind of a traditional Christian household, it can, even if it's not directly taught, explicitly taught, it can come off that this is more important, or working for a church is more important or more godly. But I think you're right. It's about your heart. It's about your intention. It's about the meaning behind your work. And I'm just reminded of the Romans 12 passage about like presenting your whole body as a living sacrifice, and your whole life before God is that offering. And yeah, as you say, you could have an atheist being a teacher and it wouldn't necessarily be ministry. But a Christian devoted to living out the gospel and sharing that truth it's going to be ministry to that person. So it's getting to the heart of things rather than just the behaviors, which may be more just a religious level where it's just a behavior. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I think when we think about Jesus's public ministry, we say it started when he was 30, but I would imagine that the life he was living as a carpenter was pretty, pretty life-changing for the people around him, right? Probably doing a lot of pretty amazing things, influencing people, encouraging people, loving people really well, praying for them. He didn't just like become the savior of the world when he turned 30 and started and left that business, if you will. So it's just kind of like, my friend mentioned that to me the other day, that the idea of like vocation and being like a calling is kind of a modern idea. And for most of human history, like work was to get food on the table and to build things, and it was very functional, and so it presents a lot of new ideas and new challenges when like your job can also be calling, and like how to figure out how that all works.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. Jesus wasn't any less godly prior to the age of 30. He was still completely God, and everything he did was still out of that.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I couldn't imagine actually being his like younger brother if my like elder brother was, I don't know, perfect. But they eventually believed after he like died and rose again, so they got there.
Right. You wonder if he was like a perfect carpenter, or did he ever like mess up?
Yeah, true. Because it wouldn't be a sin to mess up in carpentry. So maybe he sucked as a carpenter.
Maybe it's terrible. Yeah,
he probably tried his best. He gave his whole heart to it, but maybe he was just challenged at carpentry.
Yeah, I guess we'll never know. Well, maybe we will on the other side.
Maybe we will. So can you think of a story of just when you're in your role, living out your faith, living out ministry in everyday life, then where it's been like a real challenge to kind of know what to do or know what God would do in the situation or what God's asking you to do, or just any kind of challenging situation of living out your faith in your setting?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's every day. I think on a high level, I constantly wonder if Jesus would think about his job as much as I think about mine, because I think the work I'm doing with the kids I'm serving is really important. But I wonder, do I think it's more important than it is? And what I mean by that is like, have I elevated the work that I'm doing above maybe, I don't know, the people I'm actually serving? Like I want to be so good at what I'm doing for others that I just think about it so much. So that's kind of like my big thing I've been kind of processing recently is like, is it a bad thing to care too much about your job if it's a people-centered thing, right? Like I imagine pastors struggle with this all the time. Like, is there a place where you have to just like let go and let the Lord kind of like handle things, and not feel like you have to control everything? That's part of going back to my personality stuff. I'm sure that's.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's your N in your Myers-Briggs. You're continually thinking ideas, strategies. How can I do this better? And then you're a 1, so you always want to be a perfectionist, strive for excellence.
Right.
So you want to do it the best way possible.
Yeah, imagine living in my head where all I'm doing is thinking about how to be perfect, and I'm in a sphere where it's like literally impossible to be perfect. There's so many moving parts, so many people, so much chaos. Like it's just impossible. You're gonna fail every day. And it's tough.
Wow. And then you're always getting new students, right? Like you teach a certain grade level, and then you get it every year. You've got a new batch.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so just when you start, you think you start to like know how to like love someone and teach them well. It's like, all right, time to start over, try again. It's tough. It's really tough. And I think the biggest like kind of like in the weeds challenge that I have in terms of like how would Jesus like teach if he was in my role, right, is I constantly like kind of wonder, what does love mean in the context of student discipline? Like, is it grace? Is it the staff? Is it justice? Should I yell at kids because that's how they'll respond? Is yelling a bad thing? Is like is holding, like, what does it mean to hold someone accountable for like rules or expectations, but also not be like too stuck on these like, rules or rigid guidelines? Or there's just so much nuance when you're dealing with people, and as a broken person trying to love and serve and teach and equip broken people, and they're like high school kids too, right? So they're not perfect, and there's so much. I mean, every day I'm like just having to like press into the Lord for wisdom, because there's so much that I can't figure out on my own.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a daily challenge.
What grade do you teach? Like,
I teach so I teach two classes. I teach geometry,
yeah,
which is predominantly 10th and 11th graders, and then I teach AP calculus, which is only seniors at my school.
Geometry. So you and Pythagoras, he was a Christian, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think all mathematicians have some awesome insight into creation.
Or was it Pascal? Or maybe I'm trying to remember back to like grade 9 when I learned about math people.
Yeah, in my undergrad, I'm sure we had to. Actually, probably the test I did the worst on in my math undergrad was the math history test. So I have no clue. I was like, this isn't math. This is just history. I don't want this back.
I didn't sign up for this.
Right. I felt like it was a bait and switch.
Okay, so transitioning a bit, for you going through this struggle, trying to figure out what does it mean to serve God? What does it mean to be like Jesus? Are you doing this alone? Do you have like a community? How do you kind of wrestle through these daily struggles? You talked earlier about a friend that talked about Jesus being a carpenter. Like, what does community mean for you in your context?
So when I first moved here, I was a part of a program and a cohort of 54 people that moved from all over the country to come do this program. So, and we had to live in the same apartment complex. It was like instant Christian community, like super intense. Similar to YWAMER, where it's like you show up and like you're there, you're with each other every day. So that first summer we're in master's classes all day, getting prepared to start teaching in the fall. So I had a few friends that just like were instant kind of heart connections that first weeks, really, that are still friends today. But as you can imagine, like as my life has separated from that master's program, and now it's just like I'm a teacher, I am a member at a local church, just the people in that cohort. So now my day in, day out community is definitely the people in my community group at my church. The church I go to is a mile and a half from my apartment, and there are like 5 or 6 families that live within a couple of block radius of where I live.
Wow, that's nice.
People that have chosen to intentionally move into this community because we all desired kind of intentional living, intentional community. So it ebbs and flows each kind of year, and summer and winter and all that stuff. But the big stuff we try to do is we try to have community group, which is like our small group Bible study, once a week, and every other Sunday we have like community dinner, which is just like time to be together with kids running around and to break bread together. And there's been kind of seasons where we're praying together, or if schedules and all that kind of stuff morph. And then and I live in a small apartment, right, and I don't have washer dryer, so like my neighbor across the street has one, so I go over there every week. I'm over their house probably 4 nights a week.
It's a lot of washing.
Being with them, yeah, not so much washing every four nights a week, but it's just like there's this like codependence that we've created that is, I think, pretty beautiful. And what's awesome is that they're not teachers, so they will listen to me share what's going on, but they don't. We don't like go down this. It's kind of niche to the inner city teaching world, but like if you start talking about struggles in your classroom at school, and you're with other teachers, like 2 hours later, you realize all you did was just like vent and nothing productive happened. Yeah. So like my friends will listen and be like, oh, wow, that's tough, man. Well, here's my challenge at my work. And I'm like, oh, that's different than mine. I'd like to listen to that and realize that like everybody's going through stuff and it's not just me, and we get to I just get a lot of wisdom from people who are outside of my circumstances, and it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool. So you've got like kind of the traditional community avenues of church community and weekly Bible study group. Then you've also just got unexpected kind of unplanned community. I need a washer and a dryer, formed a friendship with someone nearby who happens to be outside of your circle, which helps challenge you and helps you to grow in different ways, unexpected ways. That's super cool.
Yeah, yeah. And there are like people who are in all those other spaces too. Like they go to my church and they're in my community group. And so it's like there's a couple families that are really, really close that literally are across the street from me. And then there's a lot of families. We like try to be together as often as possible. And being like everyone in my neighborhood is pretty much a family, like married with a kid or two or three or four. And so it's awesome, like how everybody can kind of love each other in different ways. Like the way I can love them and their family is come over an hour before dinner and play with their kids while they're like making dinner. And then they love me by letting me eat the dinner because I don't like to cook, and giving me like community and intimate relationships. And so it's kind of like I have this energy and time to give, and they have things to give me. That it's just really, I think, a really good picture of what I've always hoped for in community.
That's awesome.
That's super
you
cool
don't
to
hear
hear
a community like that often.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
So for you, Nate, what does kind of the future hold when you think about the future? Like you're an N, so you got lots of ideas. Any dreams, goals, words you're holding on to? Just hopes, dreams.
Yeah. No, I kind of am in a little bit of a dreaming phase. When the Lord called me to Memphis, one of the things I loved about the call here was that the program I did was a 4-year commitment. And I felt like I had bounced around and tried so many things after graduation that I just wanted to learn a little bit about what covenant meant and what it meant to like be a man of my word and like say I'm going to do something and be there, and not like look for ways out, not like dream about the next thing, but just be present and try to grow in a space. And so here I am 6 years later feeling like, man, I learned a lot about like what it means to show up when it's hard and not look for a way out because it's just not an option. Like I committed,
Yeah.
I feel like I learned a lot of those things, but now I'm kind of on the other side of my commitment. And a lot of my close friends from my program have kind of transitioned into new things that are exciting, and having a lot of conversations with them about how they felt about trying something new. So I'm kind of honestly, like in the past few months, been kind of praying and trying to listen to the Lord and see if he could be leading me somewhere else, or if maybe he has me at Whitehaven High School for the next 20 years. I don't know. Just trying to listen and just be open.
Yeah. Which is the best thing you can be, open to what he's saying. That's super cool.
Is this a public school, private school?
Yeah, it's a public inner city Title I school. So Title I means like it gets government funding because it's in an area that is below. A lot of the students are below the poverty line. So it's like it's an inner city school.
Okay.
And publicly funded, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It's a real deal.
Yeah.
So as we're wrapping up our time here, Nate, so you can, go over to your neighbors and play with their kids before dinner. What are pieces of advice you would have for other YWAMers that are in the spheres trying to figure out how to live out their faith, what to do after YWAM if they're just leaving, or maybe they've been out for a while but just trying to figure things out? What would be 2 pieces of advice you'd have for them?
Well, my first piece of advice is not original. When I was in South Africa in 2010, where I met Dax Fears, who brought me to YWAM, there was another guy on our trip named Andy Holt. And he is somebody I just really respect. Trip, like to go back home. I was like, dude, give me some advice, man. I need some wisdom before we leave. And he said, possibly the best advice I've ever gotten. uh, when you're working and if any piece of your life is getting in the way of your relationship with the Lord, you need to take that really seriously. And respond dramatically. And so, like, I think about in the Bible when it talks about if your eye causes you to sin, you gouge it out, right? Like if your job or some piece of the life you've created post YWAM in the spheres is causing you to drift away from the heart of the Lord, you need to like take that extremely seriously and figure out what it means to fix that. And not just like allow yourself to drift. Because we can so easily just like become content, and then we just start moving in a certain direction, and all of a sudden we've drifted so far. And we've lost our dependence. And for me, as someone who like, there's so many different vocations, right? But mine is one that I still think has this kind of like spiritual feel to it. Like it's something I can like tell Christians and like, oh wow, yeah, you're like responding to the call of the Lord for inner city education. I can like idolize that, and all of a sudden I start thinking that that my good work is a gift that the Lord needs, or it's just like this awesome gift that he's just been waiting for. And I'm reminded of the fact that when I first came to Jesus, the best I had to offer him was filthy rags. And sometimes once we start to go through sanctification, we start to like acquire some skills and some knowledge, we think that the offerings we can give him are better than what we used to be able to give him. And we start to like forget that it's done and nothing we have. And so just to remind you, like, I have to remind myself daily that, if my kids do really well on the ACT and get accepted into college, he loves me. And if they don't, he loves me. And that's got to be enough. And then it frees me to like do my job and do it well, but not like be crushed if things happen,
Yeah.
So that's something he kind of said to me, and has stuck with me, and comes back up in my heart and in my mind when I feel like something's changing. I'm like starting to focus on the wrong things.
Yeah.
That was a good way of explaining that, because I think that's like that can be a real sneaky thing, right? Because it's like, well, you're not idolizing your job, you're just working hard at it and you want to help these kids. Where even as like when I remember being in missions, I was just like, you can feel so good about yourself. Like, man, I'm going to these countries and I'm helping. And it's like this sneaky, like it can sneak in. And you explain that really well on how just to stay humble, and that, that like you're just trusting that God's doing it. It doesn't need you to do it. I liked when you said that. Like, I'm not this like giving to him. Like, you explained that really well. That's cool.
Yeah. I think it's important that we realize that like God's will be done, and it's an honor to be used. Right. It's not like he doesn't need us. He could accomplish his purposes without me. And so he's like inviting me into the work he's doing at Whitehaven High School. And he was there before I got there, and he will be there working in the lives of kids and adults after I leave.
Yeah,
that's really good.
And that was part of what freed me to leave YWAMER. Like it gives me the grace to like change vocation, right? Because I know like, oh man, they're gonna be lost without me. Like, no, they're not. Like, the Lord is gonna make a way. So yeah, I just think it's important. But so no work is more important than us fostering a continued dependence on God and daily relationship. So that's probably my one. And I do have one other piece of advice.
Give it to us.
So we talk about this a lot in my teaching program. We say comparison is one of the enemy's most effective tools to tear the body of Christ apart. And in our context, it was your first year when you're a teacher. you get placed in different schools, like to learn for like a year of student teaching. And some people are at schools that are really tough and really challenging to be at. And other people are at schools that are a little bit easier to work at. Maybe there's less stress in that, or smaller class sizes, or whatever it is that could make a teaching job easier. And if you start to compare your situation to other people's, you can really start to grow seeds of bitterness. And I think in a bigger scale, if maybe you're with YWAM for a few years and you feel like the Lord's taking you somewhere else, and then you're like on social media, like watching other people traveling the world and hearing their awesome stories, that comparison and that envy can really start to like take you out of being content and where God has you, and can make you less effective where you are. And so I think it's crucial that we I think I love a lot of things about social media, but I think it's important that we realize that people post their most exciting things and not their everyday.
Yeah, that's true.
And we have to just be wary of comparing what God has for you with what God has for somebody else.
Yeah,
that's really good.
That's really good.
That's
Those are two good pieces of wisdom.
Yes, they were. I could see why you're a very good teacher.
Yeah,
and you're easy to follow too. And like, I'm really following this whole thing.
Easy to track with, pun intended.
Yeah, there you go. No doubt.
And for those listening, he's a track man. He coaches track. He was really good at track. I don't know if you're still good at track. I think I saw a post where you like had to run against your students or something.
Yeah, I ran the Memphis Half Marathon this past fall with two of my cross country boys. One of them beat me, and I barely beat the other one, but it was tough.
That's so cool.
That's super cool.
Is that what you did in university then? You ran track?
Yeah, I ran track and played soccer, and I ran cross country for a season, but it's not necessarily what I'm most gifted at. But I do really love coaching it. I think there's so many awesome life applications with coaching and track and cross country specifically, about being faithful and committed and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really fun outlet for me and way to relate to kids.
That's awesome.
That's super cool. It sounds like you're really involved in your students' lives, kind of incarnationally, to use a good Christian word. You're really in there with them, running marathons with them, teaching them in the classroom, but sweating with them on the track. And that's, a really great example.
Yeah, I think especially with what I'm doing, it's almost impossible if you don't have some sort of outside of the classroom touch point with kids. It's just important. I would say probably in any vocation that the people you're serving or working with know that you're human and know that you care. And just the more time you can be with them, the more they'll feel those things. So,
yeah, that's super cool. And you mentioned Dax a couple of times. I actually saw Dax. We were in Kona for the 40th anniversary of the university back end of last year. And I saw Dax, and he's like, not with Justice Water anymore, but he's now like Lauren's right-hand man for ending Bible poverty or something. So he's coordinating stuff to help with all that End Bible Poverty initiative that Lauren's really spearheading recently.
That's awesome. Yeah, Dax is a legend, man. There's no question that he's going to change the world. He's a beast. He's
really kind. He's just such a gentleness about him.
Yeah. Incredible guy.
Well, Nate, thank you for your time. And I've just been reminiscing about you today because we haven't really chatted much over the years, but I was just thinking back to DTS. And I remember one phrase you always said, which I've adopted. And it's so simple and so basic. But I remember you used to say it to people, and it always made me feel special when you said it to me. And I noticed other people responded to it. And you'd say this line, "There he is." If I would pop around a corner and there's me and you see me like, "Oh, there he is." It's like you were just looking for me or waiting to see me, which I knew you weren't like looking for me, but you just made me feel like the most important person in the world in that moment. But you did it to everyone, but it was still genuine and authentic. And I just remember you always made everyone feel so, loved and championed. And you were always, for an ENTJs can tend to be like the run businesses, can be quite stern and judgmental, but you always came across as extremely kind, gentle, like a good coach, really. So, I was just reminiscing about you today and what a great friend you were. And I think I actually prayed. I think I might have told you back on DTS, like, I pray, God, one day we'll be in the same city and we'll get to work around each other. And,
Yes.
he hasn't answered that prayer yet, but maybe in this life, or maybe when the kingdom finally manifests fully on earth, and we'll live next to each other. You can use my laundry.
Dude, no doubt, man. I will intentionally not buy a washer so I can go to your house.
Yes.
And every
Yes.
time I
Well,
go,
on
I say,
that
there
note,
he is.
We will finish on that note. Thanks, Nate, for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was amazing to hear what you're doing. It's really cool what you're doing. I feel like you're doing it very well.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. And Jordan, it's great to catch up, man. We'll have to do it more than once every 7 years.
Yeah, that's right. Amen.
All right, man.
All right, see you later, bro. Well, that is all for now. We hope you were encouraged by today's interview. If you aren't already doing so, subscribe to this podcast, follow us at YWAMERS on Instagram, and check out our website for more resources to help you thrive in the spheres.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.